Well, welcome to the 7th edition of Stepping Into Ourselves, the Gathering of Priestesses. Tonight we are blessed with two very different women who have stories that will astound and amaze you. Kim Duckett is, she has a Ph.D., so I should call you Dr. Duckett, in women's studies and transpersonal psychology. She's been the mystery director of the spiritual director of Whisper, which is a chapter of RCGI. She is a founder of a Year in a Day Sacred Mystery School. I think you're going to talk about that a little bit tonight as well, which is a 3-year feminist spirituality curriculum. She's taught women's studies at the university for 30 years. And she's includes courses in women in psychology, shamanic ritual. She's a shamanic ritualist and a presenter at annual priestess gatherings. She's at the National Women's Music Festival, and her personal and professional interest is solely on the psychology of her people, the goddess women. And Erin Lund Johnson is a mother priestess of the, okay, I'm going to butcher this, Breedine Order of Priestesses and Flame Keepers, which fosters service and sisterhood through tending the sacred flame and healing waters of the breed, and through offering both a shared spiritual tradition through the, I can't even say that. You're going to get to say those words later. It's basically Celtic words. So, Erin, you get to tell us all about that and pronounce it correctly before I step in it and have to go back and edit myself. We are here tonight partially because we're all in this book, Stepping Into Ourselves, an anthology of writings on priestesses. It's available from Goddess Inc., and that's goddess-inc.com. As a listener of this show, you get a 15% discount if you put in the bonus code SUMMER2014, all one word. So I hope you have a copy. If you don't have a copy, order one. Order one for your mother, for your sisters, for your friends, everybody. So love this book. I'm going to mute Raven because we've got too many sounds here. Okay. So this is number 7, and what I want to tell you is the shows that have gone before have been absolutely fabulous. We've had incredible priestesses, and I know that you two are going to surpass everything we've had so far. So please relax and enjoy yourselves, and just know that we're here to be your friends. Our friends are listening to you. They're going to be listening to you later. So give yourself the opportunity to share and to let us know who you really are. So the first question that I always ask is, what drew you to being a priestess? And Erin, I'm going to start with you on that one.
It was kind of a convoluted path. It wasn't direct. What first drew me was an interest in my ancestral heritage. My name is Erin, which means Ireland, and I was always told that I have a great-grandmother from Ireland and family from Scotland, and I'd always felt a connection to that heritage. And as I grew up, I learned about the myths from those lands and read them and got to know the gods and goddesses in those stories. Later in my youth, I was fortunate enough to save up money to take a backpacking trip around Ireland and Scotland, and that brought me closer again to those energies. And eventually, I came to feel an affinity for the goddess Breach. And through that affinity, I learned that there was this service to her, this devotion, called flame tending. And so I became a flame tender with Or Brishak, the first order that I knew about. And from there, the relationship has developed and grown, and I've been a flame tender for a few different orders over the years, and eventually I felt drawn to putting together my own order to include several elements which I felt would expand on, deepen, and enrich the flame tender experience. And so I created an order to meet all of those needs.
So what would you describe the flame tender, the role as? I mean, it sounds self-explanatory, but I have a feeling it may not be quite that self-explanatory.
So this goes back to what is known right now as a Catholic tradition in Ireland, in Kildare, where a sacred flame dedicated to St. Bridget was tended by 19 nuns. This tradition started very early on in about the 900s. And over the centuries, the flame was put out and then relit several times, and then finally extinguished. I don't remember which century, but it was recently relit, speaking in modern times, in the year 1993. There were two groups of women who relit the flame. One of them is the sisters who are now at Kildare, and they keep the sacred flame. And their flame is the one that all flame tenders essentially tend. And what each nun does and what each sister does in any flame tending order is to light this sacred flame, which is an embodiment of the goddess Breach in the world, and tend it for as much as you can over a 24-hour period. And then that flame is then passed on to a next sister to also tend the flame. And during this time, we commune with Breach. We seek knowledge for ourselves. We pray for healing for others and for the world and for the land. And ideally, we have opportunity to bond through these experiences.
I wonder
There's thought that this... I'm sorry. There's thought that this came from an earlier priestess order, but there's no sure knowledge that there was. We do know that the temple at Kildare was built on older pre-Christian foundations. The nature of those is not known for sure yet.
Yeah, I was thinking about a completely different ceremony, which is the Olympic ceremony, where a flame is lit and then carried around from city to city to city. And I mean, that's a tradition going back at least 500 BC we know of. And so, you know, and it probably predates that piece of the ceremony. So it's like that was the tradition of holding that flame aloft and keeping it alive. And you know, of course, in the Judaism, there is the keeping the flame alive, having the light, and in fact, the entire festival that is the you know, the celebration of the fact that the flame kept alive for 7 days until they could get more oil there to keep the everlasting flame lit. So I just wonder if maybe there, you know, of course the Celts came to Ireland, we don't know when, but you know, somewhere not too long ago actually. So in historical terms, people, you know, we're talking about maybe 400, 500 BC as opposed to 5000 BC.
Correct.
So I just wonder whether or not that has some resonance there. You know, the Greek, the you know, obviously there's the tradition of keeping a flame alive.
Yes, there's also the connection with the Roman Vestal Virgins who kept alive the flame in Rome, which represented the spirit and the livelihood of the city and of the people. And there is a thought that perhaps the flame in Kildare served a similar purpose at one point, that kind of civic tribal purpose in pre-Christian times. But it was always traditionally tended by women, and so Breed is very much connected with women's mysteries and traditions. And the flame tending as it's done today is not a literal flame that is carried around like the Greek flame, or a flame in place, except for where it is in Kildare, Ireland. That one is in place. For those of us not there, we can write to Ireland, we can write to the sisterhood there, or email them, and they will mail out small candles that have been lit by that flame and then extinguished. And the idea is that the spirit of that sacred flame and of Breed is within that wick. So whenever you light other candles from it, you reignite that sacred flame that then unites all of those sacred flames as that single flame.
Yeah, there's also the tradition of, I think it's called need fire and wildfire, where need fire is lit from a fire that has been lit before, or from a candle that has been lit before, whereas wildfire is the original, where you're, actually causing it to light with something, either a bow and a stick, or creating new fire. So, and that's a strong tradition throughout Scotland and Ireland and parts of, Wales and what have you. Anyway, I want to bring Kim in here. Kim, I'm going to mute you when you're not speaking because there is a certain amount of feedback on your line. Okay, Kim? Hi. So, would you tell us what brought you? I mean, you said you've been doing this for 30 years. What brought you to the path of the priestess?
I think I came here to this planet on that larger transpersonal level to work with it, to help heal and re-empower women. So it's, being a priestess is my beingness. But on this plane, the way it happened was I've done women's studies for years, taught it, lived it, and then I felt a calling to find ways for women to heal, both individually and collectively. And so I began to pay attention to what we were already doing in the way of circles and rituals. So I began to offer classes. I am a teacher being as well. I've taught in the university and also out in the community. And gathered women together and just started doing it for it. It was only 7 years into it that I felt a call to be ordained as a priestess. One of the interesting things for me is that my Ph.D. is in women's studies and transpersonal psychologies and in ritual. So on my transcript, it says Imbolc, it says spring equinox, it says Beltane, it says all of those words on my transcript, which I love, except maybe when I'm applying for work, at a pretty mundane place. And what happened for me with that is that I went into one of our independent bookstores here, and it was, the late 80s or early 90s, and I saw all these books about the goddess and women's spirituality, and my priestesshood does come from that. It's from the contemporary women's spirituality movement, the goddess spirituality movement, which, we wouldn't be having this conversation without the women's movement. So I remember standing there, Gloria, looking at all the books about women's spirituality and goddess, and I said to myself, oh gosh, I would love to read all of those. And I had this little voice, this little whisper that said, well, you can't. And how that came about was to do a Ph.D. in basically ministry. So, that's the way I came to it. As a feminist, I used to call feminism my spiritual path. And today I'm able to say that it is the Dianic Goddess and its movement that is my path.
Yeah, well, so you have basically been walking this path for quite some time. And I know that you're involved with the women's music movement, and but I'm not quite clear. I tried to figure out, based upon the little bit I could find out, what it was that you were doing there. Is music part of your tradition, or a part of what you do?
No, it isn't, Gloria. I'm not sure what you found. What is it that it looks like it says?
it said that you were part of the National Women's Music Festival.
Oh, yeah, I went there as a ritualist and did their opening and closing rituals for several years, and also did workshops there. But definitely not music for me. I leave that to the other folks in my tribe and community.
Well, that's fabulous. And, you know, one of the things that all of us serve in different ways as priestesses, and some of us have the gift of music and some of us don't. I don't. So I don't worry about it, but I got thrown out of the Baptist choir when I was 8 years old, so I figured that was a sign. That was a sign. Nobody gets thrown out of the Baptist choir. I got thrown out because I was too loud and I couldn't carry a tune. So I figured that is, you know, based upon that, music was not my calling, although I love it very much. It's for other people. So I understand where you're coming from. And so, Kim, when you began, as you said, in the late 80s and 90s to unpack this, you know, the fact that you had come here for the goddess, that you had come here to work with the goddess women, what did that look like?
What I have been doing is women's circles and women's classes on goddess and women's spirituality. That is how I began Priestesses. I didn't call it that first. You know, in those days, it was not, we weren't as aware of what we were doing and being and becoming. I was just called to do it because my life is dedicated to women. And so I offered classes about women's spirituality that women met once a week for 13 or 16 weeks, being the academic person I am, everything's 16-week semesters. And I also, for 13 years, offered a large, open women's community holy day rituals in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. Now that's something to do every month for 13 years. And it was about the wheel, which is what my work is mostly about today, is about the wheel of the years of spiritual psychology for women. But initially it was offering those rituals for any woman who wanted to come. And so that's how my priestessing began and continued all those years. And today, like I said, it's all about the wheel of the year. And I think all of us, a lot of us, well, I'll say all of us, know about the wheel of the year. It's in common usage now. Most people think of it as a part of Wiccan or goddess spirituality or pagan spirituality, as did I. So what happened for me, Gloria, is I feel like I was supposed to do this next piece about making the wheel of the year and the holy days about our goddess psychology. Mm-hmm. When I go to the Women's Herbal Conference here, the Southeastern Women's Herbal Conference, I hold up a tincture and I hold up a jug of tea and some herbs, and I say we are moving away from patriarchal medicine. What are we going to do about our emotional uncomfortableness or disease? Because we don't have a psychology. We don't. Patriarchal psychology hasn't been good for women. They're changing, I think, because of women's participation and because of transpersonal input. So, asking women in that situation, what are you going to do when you're hurt emotionally? And there are herbs for that, but we also have other things that we might need. And that's part of the wheel work that I do today is we follow the holy days as a psychology and, learn to draw guidance and comfort from nature. And I think my sisters and my foremothers in women's spirituality and goddess spirituality have always valued the psychological piece of what we've been doing in spirituality. But nobody has explicitly named it a psychology or created a way for it to be a developmental model in the way that I'm doing today. So I feel, again, I honor my foremothers who've known that it is, but I feel like that this is my gift back to women, and especially goddess women. I think I was called to come here and do that. Because, I go to the National Women's Music Festival, or I go to ASWIM, and I'm still asking women there, we're moving away from patriarchy in so many ways, and what are we doing about our psychology? And I often get really blank looks. I don't think we should be without. And so I go to all these different places, sharing the idea and also getting a lot of feedback from women, because that's the only way this psychology will build itself. It's not from the outside in, but from women sitting in circle with each other. So, I've sat circle with women for 20 years, and I know that some of you have done that as well. But the psychologist part of me, was always listening, not only as a woman or as a teacher, but as that person who was seeing and feeling the need for psychology. So I don't know if that has a lot to do with your question, but it is how I came to Priestess, is what I'm doing today.
I'm going to say it's a very Southern answer. Having been raised in the tradition down there, where you sort of throw in everything and get to the point eventually. So, Erin, the Wheel of the Year, of course, is very important in the Celtic tradition as well. So is that part of your tradition as well, the tradition of breed?
It is, insofar as the 4 Celtic days that are a part of the agricultural and pastoral calendar are all tied in to the cultural as well as the physical lifestyle that was extant at that time. And certainly the holiday of Imbolc is a very big deal because it's dedicated to breed, and so it's one of our most special days of the year. And within our order, we have a Secret Sister gift exchange that we do to honor it. And I have felt sort of a calling to work with that Wheel of the Year within the context of a story that has to do with breed, which comes from Scottish folklore that is called The Coming of Angus and Bríde, and is the story of the coming of spring per the time of winter when the Winter Queen, the Cailleach, had Bríde locked up as a maiden and imprisoned her inside the Cailleach's mountain. And eventually Bríde becomes freed by Angus, who dreams of her from the Green Isle, from the other world, and comes and finds her and brings her out into the world, and then they are married on Bríde's day, and they're crowned the king and queen of the unseen beings in the fairy world. And from there they do battle with the Cailleach, which is evident through the patterns of weather. The storms that come and go, the deep clouds that come, the frosts that come and go, until eventually at equinox, when the balance is regained and the warmth begins to gain over the cold, then the king and queen of summer are finally victorious, and then the summer can begin coming on. I created sort of a Wheel of the Year story to go with that, with some rites for our priestesses to enact for themselves and for their communities to honor those times. So I began it, I'm still working on it, I haven't completed it yet. I began it at Samhain with honoring the Cailleach who is coming as a spirit of winter, and in viewing her as not just someone who imprisons Bríde, but who holds the dream of summer throughout the winter time, when the land is at rest, when nature's energies are at rest, and remembering the blossoming of summer and the expanding energies of summer and a lot of the healing that comes along with that time of the year. And then at Imbolc we celebrate Bríde herself, and we receive her energy of the rising sun into waters that we save and use for blessing and healing throughout the year. And then the extra day that we throw in besides just the 4 days, the Celtic days, is a day that's little known in Scottish Gaelic tradition called La na Cailleach, which is the Cailleach's Day, and that corresponds with the spring equinox. It's traditionally celebrated March 25th, just the way that Christmas is traditionally on December 25th, but it's meant to correspond to the solar event that's beside it. And that was the time when the Cailleach realizes that she's lost the battle, and so she goes back to the Green Isle and sits at the Well of Youth and becomes a young girl again throughout the summer months. And then in the May time, they're crowned the King and Queen of Summer, Brige and Angus are, so that they can bless the growth of the summer and the growth of the land. And then Lughnasadh comes, which is the time of the harvest, and then that brings us back again to Samhain, when nature's energies go back underground, and the dream of spring, the dream of summer, rests through the winter.
What I notice is you are a wonderful storyteller.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't know whether you've ever heard of the practice of goddess karaoke, but it was a practice that Patricia Monahan invented, where she would tell a story and she would have the people who were in the class act out the story. And
how fun!
And I just, if you haven't heard of it, I wanted to share that with you because I have a feeling you would have a great time telling the story and letting others act it out for you. We did that on the Nile with Normandy Ellis as our storyteller, and fabulous, incredible, roaring. Let me put it this way, it makes everything insanely funny, is the best way I can. The most tragic story, whenever you get enough overacting in it, is really funny. So
it sounds like a good time. I could have fun with that on the storytelling and the acting side.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you because I'm listening to you and I'm listening to the cadence of your voice, and you really have the cadence of the storyteller there. And the ability,
Thank you.
And I know that you homeschool your kids, so I imagine you've done a lot of storytelling as well. So
certainly,
Kim, I want to bring you back in here now, and I know you've done a lot of storytelling too. So part of your way of being in the world that I understand from people who got on my case by the fact I couldn't find a picture of you is that they told me you're a wonderful storyteller. Now, what do you say?
Wow. I've never thought of myself as a storyteller. So that is interesting. We do tell the story of the holy days, and maybe that's what we mean when they say that. And our perspective is very different from Erin's and from others. I love getting to know your culture here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I consider all of us different cultures.
I do.
Here, patriarchy wants us all to be subcultures, and it just drives me crazy when I say, no, we are horizontal, many level cultures. So in our culture, I did tell a story about the holy days, and it corresponds to women's life cycle. So, for example, in Lund, we also honor Brige, and we also take our vows at that time for the year to come to say yes to the living of life again. Deep in the winter is really an intense time to say yes to living. It's supposed to keep people alive, I think, to say yes. And for us, like spring equinox is the divine birth time. It's not the maiden. We separate those two stories because they're very different. Their tasks are different and their needs are different. In April, we have added some holy days too. I like that y'all have done that as well, Erin, bringing the older back and renewing it. We've added in April, it is when we honor the maiden, and she is the teenager, the adolescent. And again, she's very different from the girl. We don't do any of this honoring in this story. We don't talk about reproduction. It's not about becoming a woman because you have your moon time. And it's really funny when I wrote this essay for the Transpersonal Journal, this International Journal of Transpersonal Studies, and one of the women who looked over it, she said, well, how can this be about spring in the wheel, because there's no sexuality anywhere in this. And that's just how kind of embedded this notion of the wheel is. So part of my story is to honor the maiden in April. And then in May we honor She Who Bleeds. And again, we don't talk about reproduction. It's so different than anything else that other people are doing with the wheel and women. Yeah, there's no focus on that. Maidens and maidens need to learn a lot of other things. And then the story continues to She Who Creates, and She Who Sustains and Nurtures her creation in June. And the story also changes in July for us, where we honor the Amazons. And we're the only ones who have on our ritual calendar the Amazons. She who protects that which has been created and sustained and nurtured. And again, she's an energy in the universe, and some people feel like it's their identity or their beingness, Amazon. But also, she's an energy in women. She who protects. And then it continues to move through the story. Lawless is there. Oh, one of my favorite holy days. Do you celebrate, Erin? You can nod. Do y'all celebrate Lawless?
Yes, Lunasa.
Lunasa. Lunasa is a god's name, and I'm Dianic, and so we don't do God. But we do honor the same kind of traditions about Lawless in the time of first fruits and attitude. And we're also getting ready, and this is where the storytelling comes from probably. We do honor the story of Persephone and Demeter, Hecate. Not the patriarchal version where she is raped and taken into the underworld by Hades, but a much earlier story about her going willingly into the underworld. And that's part of the psychology that we teach, and how healthy it is to go into an inner time to reflect, and before coming back out to do. So that's why we celebrate Persephone. It's a big deal to go into the deep time of the year. I love the research too, Erin, about the coming in and going in adventure. We do that in autumn equinox. We do, Gloria, for all these 20 years, we've been doing what we call the Elysian Mystery.
Yeah?
Yes, it's a weekend. We spend the night out, camp, and we reenact the Persephone and Demeter story. And we also do ritual about us getting prepared to go in and feeling the call to go in. So yeah, I'm really proud of that piece that we've done for all these years. Again, we don't do it like most people do. And then, you know, there's the midlife woman, and that's part of what I'm going to be sharing as an idea to folks tonight, is the honoring of us women at midlife. Blessed be.
Yes.
Yeah. Because usually we're put out to pasture. But it's such an exciting time for women at midlife, and it's an assessment. And then the other thing that we've added in our story is the crone. We don't bring her in at death. She's much more for us in our story. We celebrate her in November, which is when a lot of people are doing Thanksgiving, and we're doing thank goodness for our elder women in our lives. So that's the story part of it. And I do often, Gloria, do that for 7 Demeter thing and tell us.
Yeah.
We've had people tell the story in seriousness. We had one group in the mystery school do Little Red Riding Hood. Another group had a TV talk show with Persephone, Demeter, and Hecate. and that dialogue that they have with each other. So there's all kinds of ways to tell it.
I actually had a professor whenever I was in college, my psychology class, that one of the things that we were to do was to do an intervention with Persephone and Hecate, and he I don't know, the idea being that, you know, we were working with the two different aspects, and we were to present it as though we were moderating between the two of them. So I went to some extremely liberal schools. So okay, so yeah, Kim, I'm having to mute you because of the sound feedback. So when you want to speak, raise your hand and give me a minute to unmute you. Okay? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Gloria. There is no Hades in our story. I just wanted to say that because in the original, we don't think that there was Hades either. That was a later invention of patriarchy. But we did talk about women being grabbed by Hades, which we talked about as patriarchy. Most of us as young girls were grabbed by Hades, and we spend the rest of our lives often trying to heal from what happened to us as girls. We can also be grabbed by Hecate, which is our inner wisdom. You know, those things that happen to us unexpectedly. Illness and death and losses. We think those are Hecate, not Hades. Things like rape and incest for us are not part of the natural cycle at all. They're not on the feeling, but they are definitely next to Hades. Yeah, so that's the only way we need to talk about it. Thank you for letting me finish that.
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that I know is I spent a great deal of my time up in the Pacific Northwest, and we had boats. And our experience of Hecate was different than most people's, because what we thought of was Hecate Straits, which was Hades squared. Because you would go to the Queen Charlotte Islands, and I'll guarantee you, I don't know anybody that ever did it and didn't find that the storms came and the winds came and the waves came, and so, you know, truly experience. If you want to truly experience Hecate and Hades, that's where I suggest you go and do it. So you're unmuted, Kim. I know you wanted to say something.
I never heard that the idea that way, but absolutely, one could be grandfather.
Yeah. So I ask you to, if you had something that you would like to give to our audience tonight, as far as a presentation, a poem, or a ritual. And I forgot to ask you before I started the show, because we had some little technical glitches going on. Do you have anything that you wanted to present this evening, Erin or Kim?
I do.
Okay, you both do. All right.
Please.
All right.
I do. I have something for 10 minutes, but I'd love to hear Erin. Do you have something too, Erin?
Okay.
I haven't decided yet.
Okay, well,
I can go first.
Kim, we're going to let you go first then.
Yes.
So this was for 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
You will help me. Yeah. And I hope everybody can understand my accent. If not, we'll get an interpreter. So this is a chapter from my book that's hopefully going to be published in the near future. I'm in some dialogue with Goddess Inc. about this book, about the wheel as the psychology for women. And this is about autumn equinox. Autumn equinox, and the reason I'm sharing it is to share the autumn assessment with you. Autumn equinox has a multitude of meanings and psychological opportunities for those of us who follow the wheel and the spiritual psychology. Like spring equinox, autumn equinox is a twofold holy day, being both about the midlife phase of a woman's life and also related to that poignant seasonal turning we refer to as Persephone's change in consciousness. This is when Persephone is out in the outer world and she goes to herself, because this is all there is. And wants to go to rest with Hecate. Our use of the Persephone and Demeter story to describe that call to go inward along with the rest of nature during the undertone of the wheel. In pagan and women's and goddess spirituality community, autumn equinox is associated with the end of the growing season that culminates in harvest celebration. While honoring the harvest of the year just passed, or the lifetime, it may be a part of what a woman feels called to work with and ritualize at this holy day. As a developmental law, this time of the year is also equated with midlife and the autumn woman, which was a term that Patricia Lund has in season 4. A rich and complex matrix, it includes a time of taking stock as our earthly ancestors did in the fall, assessing your storehouses of food and supplies in preparation for winter. At autumn equinox, we as women enter a corresponding time of personal assessment. We proactively ask ourselves a set of pointed questions as we explore the spiritual psychology of a woman at midnight. There's much here in the season itself to invite a woman to know herself. I ask women questions such as, how do you feel about the autumn time of the year? What are your associations and memories? How do you feel about the coming of winter? There is a wealth of information waiting to be revealed and honored in personal rituals in response to these questions. Our feelings about the actual seasons themselves is more than enough for an earth-based psychology, if only we stop to ask ourselves or are asked and given the opportunity to reflect and respond. Being listened to and witnessed, especially at junctures such as this, is essential to women following the wheel of the psychology. We ask women in the ministry school and the wheel of the year training to make a written list of their harvests for the year. This can include things that have come into being, things that have gone wrong, successes and achievements, or simply the things we are grateful for, or that we've encountered or that have unfolded or evolved in our lives. These are the things we will name and ground and ritualize together as our harvest, drinking in the sweet juice of the outward time and speaking the language. I have sown, I have tended, I have grown, I have gathered, I have reaped the good harvest. Goddess, thank you for your gifts. Goddess, thank you for your bounty. For a woman, this may be her primary work for personal ritual for a particular year, and in some years it's enough. In our overview of this season, however, we use the idea of a yearly harvest assessment to introduce and initiate a broader perspective that suggests the wisdom of applying this seasonal endeavor to the larger phases of a woman's lifetime. The autumn time of a woman's life occurs at midnight, and if she and this time are honored and respected, it can be a time of harvest, the harvest of a lifetime, a harvest of all that she has worked for and experienced. This is the autumn woman that poignantly and eloquently described by Pat Monaghan in Seasons of the Witch. I remember when I realized I was a late summer woman, and then later made the transition chronologically to an autumn woman. Having these namings and increments were extremely helpful and healing for me as I moved into being a woman stage. Although it is, of course, a slow natural process, it can feel shocking and lonely, suddenly finding oneself older. Do I get to testify to that? Our hope is that the educating and honoring we do at Autumn Equinox will help heal or offset the disparaging jokes women of this age have encountered about the midlife crisis, generally, and about women in aging specifically, and will also provide information and support to women who are not yet at midlife as they move towards this life phase. So this is the tool that I created. It is a set of questions, and this is what's going to be my gift to folks who, if they're interested in getting this excerpt and these assessments. And I'll just name these quickly. First of all, make a list of your harvests, things that have come into being or things that have gone well. Successes, gratitude. Perhaps you might want to simply list all that you have done or encountered or that has come your way this year. This impulse and the bounds. 2, make or keep a list of those things or desires that come up that feel like they will need more work and more tending to come to harvest. Those are the things in your life that have not yet totally ripened or been completed. And 3, make a list of those things that would go under the heading of losses. things that fell by the wayside, things that have not yet had a focus, things that you had to put on the back burner. Later you will discern that these are permanent losses, that is, things that need to be released or let die. These will be some of the things we will bring to our solid ritual. They could also, though, be simply dormant, waiting for new growth, intended sometime in the future. There's your word. 4. In this tradition, our tradition here at Western, we honor an ancient ritual called the Vijay Festival. Now, this term comes from the Budapest, of course. Who else would not, call it that, the Vijay Festival? And here's where I ask women to make a list of those people that you have had conflict with or both with this past year. You may or may not decide to clear the air with them before the inner training. And this is always an interesting one, Gloria. It's so powerful to me to name the people I've worked with, because it's there anyway. It's following me around, it's sitting on my shoulder. And to write it down and see it in black and white has been really helpful. And it has also been helpful to have the choice about whether to try to work on that disconnect or not, because some things can never be really healed. But it's a great thing. It's like the 12 steps, the 4th step. You make a list of people you harmed and you make a list. But this is our Vijay Festival. I love it because, in my culture, in my community here, our tribe, we know that this is coming up. So we know that we're probably going to be calling each other kind of sheepishly and saying, well, I'm sorry that happened. And it's not such a shocking thing. It's good to have that kind of built into once a year. And lastly, and I'll finish with this, we are moving toward the dark time, the time when there's less light, less outwardness, less call to be so outwardly focused. Do you hear an inward calling of some sort? Are there things you'd like to bring into attention? What will you be focusing on in the inward time? Have you had any glimpses in the outer time of the things that wanted your attention? And are there some studies calling? How do you feel about the time every time? Please give some time thinking about and responding to this question.
Thank you. That's lovely. I look forward to reading that book. So I'm going to mute Kim and Erin. Oh, I am muted as well. Unmuted. I'm unmuted now. A little more technical tonight than I need to have. Erin, yeah, I think you figured out that you did have something you wanted to share with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm back.
You're back, yeah. So,
thank you, Kim, for your sharing.
Yes. So, did you have something you wish to share with us this evening?
I do have something, actually. It is a story that is in the back of a book called The Carmina Gadelica. And this book is a compilation made of the folk life of the people of the Scottish Highlands and Islands around the turn of the 20th century, when they still lived in their traditional crofting communities. And this is one of the stories that was collected and recorded there. And it has become important to me on many layers, and one of the layers I'd like to share with you here. So I'm just going to briefly go through it. It's not too long, and then I'll tell you my thoughts about this.
All right.
The following summary is translated and condensed from Lachlan MacDonald's prose poetry, and I'll read you the English version instead of the Gaelic version.
Oh, thank you.
The maiden, you're welcome. The maiden queen of wisdom dwelt in beauteous bower of the single tree, where she could see the whole world, and where no fool could her beauty see. And then the story begins. Great grief was on the queen of fairyland at seeing the want of wisdom in the daughters of men. And the fairy queen put her lips to the fairy flax, and every blade and plant, every frond and flower, and every bush and tree throughout the wide world breathed invitation to the daughters of men to come to the knoll, and that she, the fairy queen, would give them wisdom. Much commotion followed this invitation, the whole woman world heaving and moving like the hill of the ant, the bike of the wasp, or the hive of the bee. The proud scorned, the foolish laughed, but the thoughtful sighed. Some said that they were wiser than the fairy queen herself, others that they had wisdom enough already. But many dames and damsels came to the knoll, some to see, some to be seen, and some to seek wisdom. Presently, the Queen of Fairyland appeared, holding in her hand the Kupon Mora, or the Cup of Mary, the blue-eyed limpid shell containing the Ash, or essence of wisdom. The lovely little queen was arrayed in all the beauteous iridescent hues of silver, emerald, green, and mother of pearl. Loveliness shone round her like light. Her steps were the music of songs. With a grace of form and a charm of manner all her own, the fairy queen held up the Kupon Mora and invited all the women of the world to come and partake of the Ash. A derisive wave moved over maids and matrons, like a wave of light over the green and golden corn. But to all who sought wisdom in their hearts, the fairy queen gave of the Ash, to each according to her faith and desire, till none was left. Many came to the knoll too late, and there was no wisdom left for them. And that is why some women are wise, and some are otherwise.
That's great. That's fabulous.
So this story has struck me on so many levels, and I've worked with it on different levels. The main level in which it was used in their tradition, in their everyday folk life, was the level of wisdom was how handy were you, how clever were you at the traditional skills. And they would say a woman who was very clever with her skills, she'd been to the knoll, that woman, you could tell. And a woman who was just not very good at anything was clearly she didn't make it to the knoll in time. But the thing that strikes me about this is that it's about women in particular, and it's about the fairy queen in particular. And there is an historian and storyteller who has analyzed this story some and says that the fairy queen could only be the goddess Brige because she was the primary goddess of the Scottish people that became Saint Bridget in the later tradition. And so what I see in this story is a whole series of symbols that relate to Brige and to women and to what is essentially, I see, an initiation for women. The knoll being the hill and the tree is the whole motif of the world tree at the center of the world. And she is the spirit of that tree, indwelling in that tree. And her Kupon Mora, her cup of Mary, her cup for which she dispenses the ambrosia of wisdom, this is another symbol of the Grail that we all seek, from which wisdom is given. The plant that she uses, that's called the fairy flax, there is another Gaelic word in the Gaelic version of the story for that plant, and when I looked up the name of that plant, it says that it was called the menstrual plant. So this struck me as a kind of initiation for women into women's mysteries, into those womb mysteries. And the fact that this call goes up through the plant world, this to me is a symbol of the plant energies and the plant healing that women have learned to work with and pass that knowledge down through the generations of women. And that through this call, all women are called. And for those who are ready for this wisdom, they can pass through this initiation. And where it says that she lives in the tree where only the wise will see her, where no fool could see her. This to me is a way of saying those who've been initiated and have received the wisdom will be able to see her and commune with her. And until they have done so, she will remain hidden until they answer that call and come to the knoll and drink the ash of the cup of wisdom.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I know that both of you are not the most public of people. So I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you wanted to have people from our audience get in touch with you, how you might be able to tell them where they can reach you. Kim, you have the least digital footprint of any person I've ever seen. So, but I know you're in the process of getting a website done. Would you like to share with us how people can get in touch with you?
Yes. And Gloria, I do have a website now because of your request, and I can just hear my community if it's like clapping or howling or whatever. Right now, it's for this this endeavor that we're doing here with the summit. It is whisperinc.weebly.com. So if you go on that website, there are two places. One place is where you can request this a PDF of this excerpt from my book about the Field of the Years of Psychology. And you can also use that, Gloria, to I'm offering the folks here listening a booklet called Why I Call Spirit Goddess, and it's from a talk that I did. Because isn't that one of the most common questions? Is why do you call spirit goddess? Why do you think I'm saying female? So I have this response that has been helpful to a lot of women. So you can request that there on the website. You can also contact me directly through my Gmail account, and that is whispermysteryschool@gmail.com.
Okay. Would you do me a favor and would you send me the just take a minute and send me an email with the website and your address, and whenever I send out the link to the recording of this, I'll put it in there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And yes, I am difficult. I have not used a website. I don't have a business card. It's a mystery school. And I know it makes it difficult sometimes to find us, but I'm so protective of us. As a women's studies person for 30 years, and also starting the Rape Crisis Center, working with images of women in the media, and now doing this, goddess stuff. Sometimes the commentaries and the reactions have not been kind, and so I've been very protective of the women who come to our program. That's part of what's been going on.
Well, I honor that, and I also know that we have a lot of women around the world that want to connect with us, and I've got women from South Africa, South Australia, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Switzerland, a number of places, and they feel a little isolated, and they're like, hey, there's other people out there like me, and it's wonderful for them. So I'd appreciate that. Okay, and Erin, if people are interested in your studies, where would they be able to find more from you?
Ninembrija is the name of the flame tending order, and it's found on WordPress right now. I believe it's ninembrija.wordpress.com. Okay. And I'm hoping that's the correct website address.
I think it is.
I could spell that out. Ninembrija is NIGHEANBRIGHDE.
Yes. Just forget all the hard vowels. I mean, hard consonants whenever you say Celtic language. You just, if you've ever seen...
Run it all together.
Yeah, just run it all together. If you've ever seen the name Siobhan and seen how it's spelled, you know what I mean.
It only makes sense in Irish. It doesn't make sense in English.
Yeah. Well, I come from an Irish background, and very little makes sense in Irish. So I can say that with all honesty. Well, I want to thank you both for being on here tonight, and I want to give our audience a moment or two to see if there's anyone who would like to ask a question or two just before we end. If you would like to ask a question, please either click the question mark or hold the hand hold up part that you can see in the control panel there, and it'll let me know that you're interested in getting some information. The other thing I get to see is who's not paying attention. So, like a school teacher, if you're not careful, I'll call on you. Diane Perot, are you listening to us? Yeah, I noticed you had a question earlier. Did you? And I know you usually have a question for our presenters. Would you like to ask a question of either of our presenters? Diane? See, I can tell when you're not listening. Anyone else who has a question, please either raise your hand or put a question mark up there. And if not, I'm going to close this out for the evening. I do want you to know that in the, well, Erin, we're going to get you to you next. We do have now the closed group, which is for the Facebook, and I've sent out invitations to all the members and to all the authors. And so it's a place for you to interact and ask questions, and you can direct questions directly to individuals. You can ask me any questions you want. I might even answer you. That's going to scare half of them to death. But yeah, Erin, you had a question.
I do. I want to ask him a question.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you because I've always felt a closeness to the story of Persephone and Demeter that you work with. And I went through a period of depression and anxiety in my adolescence. And when I later learned about that story, I very much felt like Hades had kidnapped me and taken me down to his realm. And it was quite a while until I came out again. And later on, I learned about a book. This is incidental to the question, but I wonder if you've heard of this book. It's called The Goddess Letters. And I read it back in my 20s. I found it in a used bookstore somewhere. I don't remember the author. But it tells the story of Persephone and Demeter through an exchange of letters between the two of them while she's in the underworld. And it was a wonderful way to express that story. And if you've never read that book, I recommend finding it and checking it out. You're welcome. And I'm just very much wondering, how do you reenact your Eleusinian mysteries? If that's something you feel you can talk about. I'm very curious about that.
Well, it's definitely as a mystery. We stay together the whole weekend. We cook and live, so that helps us bond as women, which is what happened. It's more dysmorphia than actually a Eleusinian mystery. We call it that because that's what started happening in Greece. Women go on a self-paced journey out in nature. And my guardian partner, who is an altarist, has altars throughout the land. And so we go from altar to altar having these experiences. And what happens, Erin, is that we find out more about what was actually going on in Eleusinian mysteries by what women say or how they respond to the things that they encounter. And then we end up with the trance dancing. We tell the story in all kinds of different ways. And we say goodbye together to the outward time, and we go into the inward time together, which when you think of the inward time as not only the natural going in time, but that all of us have gone into the deep inward time. And in this way, we have each other. So that, to me, that compares to the notion of women going off and having these rituals on their own. So it's a mystery, and you're invited.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we do it every September near autumn equinox. We've done it almost 3 years. So yes, I'll let you know more about that. Where are you living?
I am in the area colloquially called Cascadia. Is the sound coming through okay? I'm in Vancouver, Washington, which is just north of Portland, Oregon, across the Columbia River.
Yeah,
I'm in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. So if you ever want to come.
Wow, I wish I could come and visit.
Okay, please, who knows? Persephone or Demeter, happy to give you a call. You're welcome.
Keep that in mind.
All right. I want to thank you both for being here this evening and being so generous and sharing with us. I want to thank you for the wonderful writings you put into the book, Stepping Into Ourselves. It is truly a wonderful book. It's something that you can support yourself with over the time of, I was thinking there's over 50 different stories. If you just read one a week, it would support your spirit in your practice in such a marvelous way. And I want to let you know that we've had a little, I didn't want to send out a schedule. That was one of the things I said. I don't want to send out a schedule because things change. And today I gave in and I sent out a schedule. And the first thing that came up is that Normandy Ellis cannot be on Friday night because she is going to be on the dais at her church presenting from until the time we are on. So she will not be here. I will have to have her on a different night. But I got in touch with somebody else, and she immediately said sure, and I'm delighted. She's one that wasn't necessarily scheduled right up front, but she is one of the authors in the book, and her name is Chandra Alexander, and she is a tantric, I can't say that, by Ravi. One of the problems of growing up in the South is there's a whole bunch of words you don't learn how to say. She's an initiator of the tradition of Kali, and she's the founder of Sharanya. I'm not sure. She's going to have to come back and correct my pronunciation. But she's a fascinating woman, and I'm really looking forward to having her on, and I'm just thrilled that she was willing to step up and say, sure, I'll be on Friday night at 2 days' notice. So, and with her is going to be Shauna Aura Knight, who is an artist, a writer, a spiritualist, an environmentalist, a website designer. She has so many things, hats she wears, we can't even count them. But they will both be here, I believe, Goddess willing and the creek don't rise, Friday night at 6 o'clock. So same place, and I want to welcome you all and thank you all and thank everyone who showed up. I treasure every one of you, and I treasure those that have come on to speak, and I treasure those that have come on to listen, and I treasure those that are listening to us later on. We're having over 400 to 500 views in the replays. So, there is interest. There is people who are saying, I really want to know more about this. And as we build our membership and we build our programs where we have the opportunity for you to spend more time with us, and I'm hoping in the fall, in fact, I'm planning in the fall to have some special classes for you. I'm also planning in the fall we're going to have some special publications which will give you more information about these individuals, and maybe we'll have Erin come on and do a whole storytelling round for us, and Kim as well. We'll get Kim a better speaker for that one. And I want to thank you who stood by us while we had a little technical difficulty with the sound tonight, and those of you who are listening later, no, it's not your speakers, it's our problem. Thank you very much. I love you all. Good night.
Thank you for all your work, Gloria. Good night.
Good night.